I'm Ben Campbell and this is The Self-Made Theory, a podcast about entrepreneurs, innovators and great businesses. If you've run a small business or are running a small business, the story my next guest has to tell is probably all too familiar to you. I interviewed Daniels, the CEO and founder of Adelaide-based personal transportation business EcoCaddy. It's a great business and Daniel shares with you a lot of his success and his challenges in building his business. In this episode, you're going to hear about the importance of having a mentor both early on and during your business journey, how constantly testing the market helps you iterate your idea as you bring it to life, why launching your business with a minimal viable product helps you gain momentum early, how not to have all your eggs in one basket, why it's important to get your agreements in writing, and that having a great product is not enough. You actually have to get out there and sell it. There's a lot of gems in here for you. I hope you enjoy. So Daniels, welcome to The Self-Made Theory.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
So you're the CEO, is that the right term?
Yeah, self-proclaimed.
CEO of EcoCaddy.
Yeah, that's right. So
let's hear your elevator pitch for EcoCaddy.
Well, I'm the founder of EcoCaddy and also the CEO, so the guy steering the ship. We're a 3-year-old company, a startup, started here in Adelaide, and it's a direct response to the last mile gap that any city faces. So it's a transport company. We are a zero emissions transportation service. We utilize bamboo-bodied electric-assisted pedicabs.
That's a mouthful.
It's a bit of a mouthful, yeah. So we use a vehicle that needs both human power and gets electric assistance. So a hybrid vehicle, super efficient to provide a short-trip transportation service for passengers. That's how we launched. We launched at the same time that other companies were launching in Adelaide, one starting with you. So there's this thing that's happening globally where things are speeding up. People need to be in places faster. People want more competitive pricing, so they want things to be cheaper, faster, easier. So we're sort of a response to that, but taking a green approach. So zero emissions vehicles. And we have a pretty unique platform in that we're a public transportation service, but we don't utilize public funds to subsidize the cost of the transportation. We actually partner up with brands and local organizations that we see fit to our company ethos, and they will actually pay good money to be represented on our vehicles, and we use the revenue from that to actually subsidize the costs of the service and pay our employees. So we don't use contractors, pay our employees a good wage so that they're really happy in doing their job.
Cool.
Yeah. Yep.
So where did the idea start from? Business for 3 years.
Yep.
I'm sure there are other services globally that are perhaps not too similar, or maybe they are similar to what you're doing. Where did the idea come from?
It came from various sort of points of inspiration. I'm an urban designer by profession, so I was working in Shanghai, designing sustainable cities with a strong focus on sort of mobility, infrastructure, transportation infrastructure.
Okay.
Really, if you see the city as a body, then the roads are the bones.
Yes.
So if you don't have a good bone structure, you've pretty much got a bad body. You've got a bad city. So it's about getting the right transportation infrastructure and looking at sustainable ways to move more people, not move more vehicles. So obviously light rail, high speed rail is what the Chinese were really focusing on, or still are. They have an infatuation with the car. So it was us, our design team, sort of trying to educate and somewhat fight against developers in China to say, no, this is the more sustainable and financially probably the better path to take in the long term. So interesting things can change overnight in China.
So is the infatuation with the car because they traditionally haven't had a lot of cars, or is that a human thing that we're all infatuated with our own ability to take ourselves somewhere?
Well, yeah, you've sort of you've said it. It's sort of both. So Asia, as we know, if we look at Japan, has always sort of copied what the West is doing, particularly in film and fashion. But then the Japanese especially, they've really taken that and then innovated past, and now they're sort of a force to be reckoned with in both those things. China, unfortunately, has copied some of the bad stuff that's coming out of particularly the United States, which is, focused on freeways as a way to move goods, particularly with trucking, but then also move people in the city. They also do have, subways and all those sorts of things, which are seemingly missing from a lot of Australian cities. Yeah. But the thing that's interesting about China is that obviously they want the freedom. Just like anybody does.
Of course.
And now, you have a rapidly increasing middle class. So they've got more disposable income and they're demanding more of these freedoms and luxuries. And they're an old civilization, they've been around for a long time. And so they've probably been watching the West for a long time and going, we want what the West has. So there's sort of that copycat sort of thing happening. As us as Western designers were going, yes, we understand this, but we need to move past this really quickly. And China has actually demonstrated that they're doing that in a lot of ways. One being that they're outlawing petrol cars or the manufacture of petrol cars in the next sort of, I think it's 4 years. Don't quote me on that one, but very quickly. So what they're doing is they're copying everything that the West has done for the last 100 years, and that way they get a pretty sure idea of where they'll end up, but they've condensed that so that rather than taking 100 years, it's going to take 20 years. Yeah. And they know that after 20 years, they will definitely have caught up with the West. And now we're at that stage and they're now surpassing the West. So a lot in design. And I was there going, oh my God, there's so much stuff happening. Sort of how do I apply myself? What is the best vehicle for me to positively change things? And I thought that would be, as an urban designer, sort of started to hit my head against the wall, the frustrations of bureaucracy and internal office politics. And so when I came back to Adelaide, and this is the short story, of course, but I started to see it through a different lens and said, well, actually, there's a lot of great things about Adelaide, which I didn't notice before, being a young, ambitious guy that said, I want more things to entertain me. I want more opportunity. I want more choice. So I left. I went to Melbourne.
We've all done that.
Yep, we've all done that.
I did that for 10 years.
There you go. Yeah. And I think that's that's a natural thing. And I would encourage it for anyone that's been living in Adelaide or anywhere, like leave home and live somewhere else for a while. And what you get is this beautiful thing called experience and perspective. And you'll come back and, like me, you might see things differently and go, wow, we've got really clean air here and there's actually not a lot of people here. And
I don't have to sit in traffic for an hour a day to get to my job.
No.
And look at all the wonderful things that are happening in Adelaide that I didn't notice when I was here in the environment.
Exactly.
Pretty classic. It's a pretty classic.
It is. Yeah. And then,
people could just stay, listen to the podcast, and understand how amazing Adelaide actually is.
That's right.
So they don't have to leave.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's what you're.
I'd rather that.
Yeah, cheaper option. Just subscribe to Ben's podcast. Yeah, absolutely. And that's.
So where did EcoCaddy? So where did the idea come from?
Sure.
And what were the first steps for you?
So all of that, the sort of the experiences that I was getting, I was racing bikes in China as well. These fixed gear track bikes. There was a big movement that was happening over there. The status symbol of the car had sort of transferred over to these really beautiful track bikes, seemingly expensive as well. And my housemate was actually building them. He started a company. I didn't know at the time, but that was my first taste of entrepreneurialism. Yeah. And this is 6 years ago. Yeah. And he looked more unhappy than happy, which was interesting. Sort of again
in building this business.
Yeah. So it was tough. And what I didn't realize, I was seeing it from the outside in, obviously, and going, man, Jeff, you've built this amazing brand. It's called Factory 5. Check it out if you like bikes. and it's cool. And, you've got 300 people rocking up on a Tuesday night to do these night rides, stopping traffic. So this thing happens in San Francisco once a year called critical mass. They're doing that every week, and cool people rocking up to these things, dressed cool, buying cool stuff. And I was like, you're a cool guy, Jeff. You got a cool brand. You got all this, you're making money and all this sort of stuff. Why aren't you happy? But it was, sort of the entrepreneur's dilemma, right? You're sort of in it, and you need some perspective outside of that. And I can tell you about that now that I've been doing it for 3 years, because I've definitely gone through that. But, that was one of the things when I came back to Adelaide. I was like, Jeff was doing this cool thing. I started touching base with some cool friends, that were doing some great stuff, like the guys from Studio Gram, or Gram Studios, I think is what they're called now. So they were doing, bar fit outs, and there was a small bar movement, and there was a lot of investment in new infrastructure, the Adelaide Oval, the electrification of the train network, extension of the tram, the RA. And these are all things which really turn on an urban design. It's just like, cool. Okay. And with a, sustainable focus, talking about entrepreneurialism and startups, that was starting to happen. There was guys like in the Majoran space, Hub Adelaide, so they're co-working, sort of actual physical places where people were congregating and talking about this stuff. There was Shark Tank on TV, and I was going, okay, what's in this? There was sort of an anxiety, I suppose. There was something within me that was saying I need to do something, right? And for the very first time, I was thinking maybe it was here in Adelaide. And so when I was over in Shanghai, I was also working with a company that builds the tricycles that we use, just because I wanted to learn more about bike mechanics. And I had a conversation with the founder of that company. He said, "What's the Australian market like? Could we sell these things here?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to Melbourne. I'll go into some shops and ask." And that's what started me thinking about, hey, why am I actually attracted to this this guy that invented this amazing looking machine? Why doesn't anyone know about it? And this thing really it's a transformative tool. It's a thing that can transform cities, making them better. I'm like, that's why I got into urban design. So there's all these sort of clicks happening.
Yep.
And then over the course of 6 months, I'd worked out that no one wants to buy these things in Australia because no one wants to give up their second car, because that's basically how much they cost.
Yes.
The cost of a second-hand car. No one's going to get rid of that. It takes up the space of about half a car. So no one that owns a bike shop wants to put it in their bike shop, because you're not getting that.
You're not getting the return on it.
You're not getting the return on the floor space. And so I put on my urban design hat and I said, well, what do I really want? Where do I see the potential in this vehicle? And it's like, well, if a lot of people used it, then a lot of people would actually see the benefit and the value in this type of vehicle. How do I get a lot of people using it? Well, I need to sort of create a service around the product rather than the product itself. And that's where I came up with the aha moment of, a taxi service.
Cool.
And then obviously you get on the internet and you type in stuff and it's just like, 1,000 people have already done this for the last 200 years. It's a rickshaw business,
But not in Adelaide.
But not in Adelaide. Well, actually, they had done that in Adelaide in the 80s, but it was a completely different model. And that's what I started to unpack, why it isn't in Adelaide right now, why it's in other cities, but it hasn't been adopted on a mass scale. And that's where you start to sort of, I suppose, refine the idea. And through the shortcomings of all these other businesses, and the ways that they've been operated, that's what formed EcoCaddy. So it's a direct response to all the shortcomings, and then all the, sort of future, where I saw it going in the future, and sort of where we could guide that. So using technology, creating a business model that's built around this service, and how we deal with our stakeholders and business partners. That's really where the innovation is, yeah.
So you got the idea?
Yep.
It's all come together?
That was longer than 30 seconds, wasn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So you got the idea, it came to life in your head.
Yep.
How did it come from that out of your head into you've actually now got them on the road?
Exactly what we're doing right now. So I started to talk to people. First point of validation. Always validate the concept. And you can do that through a conversation with friends that you trust,
So is it a good idea?
Is it a good
Would
idea?
you use the service?
Yeah, no, hey, I got this idea.
Yeah.
Say it to their face, gauge their reaction.
Yeah.
That's because the face doesn't lie. And then you start to sort of flesh it out and listen to what the questions are. Like, what do you mean by that? What is a pedicab? Okay, I need to describe what a pedicab is. What are the advantages? What are the value propositions? Why do I care? Why do I care about your concept? How is it going to change things and make things better for me? And start with your close circle of people. Within that close circle of people, everyone knows an accountant, everyone knows a lawyer, everyone knows a graphic designer, everyone knows a person that knows something about branding. If you don't, go onto YouTube, Google it. You've got a wealth of resources. In fact, Google it first. If you've got any questions, Google it first. There's a tool out there, and I forget what it is, but you basically send this link to a friend if they ask a question which could very easily be Googled. So don't waste people's time. That's the first thing that you have different levels of preparation, I think, so that people can take you seriously. It's just like, oh, you really seem inspired about this. You really seem excited about it. Okay, I'm going to give you a bit of time and tell you my opinion. And as you refine this idea, what you'll find is that you start talking to people that are experts or know more about it. And then
not about the idea, but about bringing the idea to life. Is that what you mean?
Both. Yeah. So, I'm in transport, so it makes sense to talk to people that may have driven a taxi before or may have been a courier before or all these sorts of things. So they're specialists. And these people become, as you sort of work your way up, I suppose.
And I'm sure they tell you not only the things that worked for them, but also the things that don't work for them.
They're the more important parts, what hasn't worked. People are less likely to share those stories, so they're harder to find on the internet and other sort of open source resources. Yep. So when you start seeking out these specialists or experts or people in the know, they're the questions that you sort of want to pose. And you want honesty. It's like, what do you actually think about this? Why would you not use this service or buy my product? So those are those little points of validation. And once I had enough of these conversations, and there was lots, I then started to actually put this stuff down on paper. So that was the next step.
So through the conversations, were you concerned that someone would steal your idea? Were you concerned that, hey, I'm having all these conversations with people, and obviously with friends you don't expect that, but others, were you concerned about giving up some intellectual property about your idea?
Yeah, I was, to a degree. And I can't remember where I saw it. Maybe it was even a podcast, but they said, if you're scared that somebody's going to copy your idea, it probably means it's not innovative enough, or it's not daring enough, it's not crazy enough.
Okay.
So you sort of want that reaction, just like, that shit's crazy, man. I'm never going to try that, That's one point of validation, And the other is obviously as you move from your close circle to your sort of outside of your network, that's when you sort of get into these points where you've refined the idea enough and you're sort of starting to understand where the value is, and you can start to protect some of components of the concept, I suppose. So yeah, when you get to that stage, it's probably good to at least have spoken to a lawyer and go, this is my idea. Take that with a pinch of salt, because lawyers, their whole business is based on, making money off of protecting assets and intellectual property. So they might try and do that prematurely as well. Yeah. So that's probably, I think share the idea. For me, I like being vocal. If you have if your secret sauce, you'll know what your secret sauce is. So just sort of skirt around that sort of stuff if you need to, but share your idea. That is the most valuable thing that I ever did. Yeah.
Well, it's fundamentally market research, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So what next?
So, get it down on paper. Draw it out. Everyone likes to get wordy. You jump on the net. People say you need to have a business plan. Bullshit. That is a waste of time. don't get into a business plan.
In terms of a formal business plan?
A formal document. Obviously, you need to plan your business. You'd be naive to think that you could launch something without some sort of a plan. But there are I
assume you still have to have the elements of a business plan. You still need to understand the finance elements. You still understand the marketing. Where are my customers going to come from?
Yes.
How am I going to pay for this thing? Where's the cash flow? You're probably going to still need all those elements, but without it being written into a 100-page document.
Exactly, yeah. And the quicker way to do that and the better model would be the business canvas, which it's a visual tool. It's a one-page, just Google it, business canvas model. It allows you to sort of segment the various components of your business and sort of in a dot point, even a diagrammatical form, be able to visualize how your business will work, the advantages, disadvantages, the risks, and the perks to your business. And the best thing is that you can throw that in front of someone and they can see that and they can understand it very quickly. The other great thing about the business model canvas is that your concept is going to change, maybe even on a conversation basis. You'll walk in thinking that you're going to have a conversation with a person and they completely blow your mind and send you somewhere else. So if you have a business model canvas walking into that, you understand where the advantages and disadvantages are. So if that person has an idea, is this an idea worth exploring and sort of pursuing? Or is this an idea that, I might park and sort of jot it down, always jot it down, obviously? Or is this idea completely absurd and not applicable? So it allows you to filter and prioritize as well, but then also iterate the idea until a business plan it's a substantial investment. It takes time. So the business model is just something that's a little bit more agile. Yeah.
So you've got it down on paper?
Yep.
You've iterated, no doubt, a few times. You've had a few different ideas and changes along the way.
Yep.
What next?
I was reading a lot as well. So about, sort of a lean startup model as well, which is what got me onto the business canvas. I actually then put together a 10-page document, which was sort of like a condensed business plan, highly visual. So the problem with my company, like a lot, was that I was just a crazy guy with a crazy idea in my head, and then I was writing that out, drawing that out, but I needed to take that a step further, and I couldn't buy these vehicles and bring them down because that would have been a big investment. So what I did was I used some Photoshop skills.
Yep.
I sent a request to the suppliers and said, can you take a photo? I then dropped that into photos that I'd actually taken out in Adelaide, and I visualized what these vehicles would look like in the city of Adelaide. What would Adelaide look like with EcoCaddy? And that was the thing that changed people's minds because they could feel it. They could actually understand what it would look like, what it would feel like.
Well, you take them there, don't you?
You take them there. You got to transport.
You're telling a story and taking them into the story.
Yep. And I didn't know what that was called at the time, and I now do. It's called an MVP, a minimum viable product. So it's how do you get to the next stage as quickly and as cheaply as possible, so that you can get a buy-in for a stakeholder. So at that stage, I was pitching to the state government, to DIPT, for them to endorse my idea so that I could reduce congestion, the emissions, and obviously provide a mobility service.
So were you pitching it to them?
I was pitching it to them
just for the endorsement, or were you pitching to them for some
money,
investment?
for seed capital,
seed funding? Yeah.
What a crazy guy trying to get money out of the government. Maybe not the craziest idea.
I don't think it's the craziest at all.
No,
right? Because when you think on the back of the benefits that it brings to Adelaide, I think it's exactly the place that we should. Yeah,
and naivety is bliss, right? So I thought this is a great idea, just like you, Ben. Just like this is a great idea. It's got so many perks. They've got to endorse it. They've got to back this. After 6 months of a lot of conversations, and them requesting a very thorough business plan, a robust model. I came out of that with a no and a pat on the back and, sort of a good luck. There was a changing of guard, and all this sort of stuff. But really, at the end of the day.
So hang on. So talk to me about that. Were there tears? Were there slump shoulders?
It was a kick in the nuts.
Did you
a huge kick.
Crawl off into a corner or into a fetal position? And what happened after the no?
Well, I was embarrassed, actually, because I had convinced a lot of people to to endorse my idea and that this was going to go through. And
did you felt along the process of pitching and developing the detailed business
and
case
the relationships
and the relationship that you actually thought you might get a yes?
Absolutely, yeah. So there was a yes. There was a yes in there, but it was verbal, and it was never. And this is one of the things that I've learned. It's like, okay, if you get a yes, you got to get that down on paper.
Let's get that yes on paper.
Yeah,
We'll talk about the podcast agreement that you can sign a bit later, right?
That's right. Yeah. Get something. But there was a silver lining in that. I suppose that the bad part was that the partners that I had, and we had built a company. We'd formed a company called Tree Cycles, and that was a company that was going to get these vehicles over and start this business up, and me leading it, and then the suppliers supplying the vehicles at a discount, et cetera, et cetera. And so they were starting to make investments in terms of their time, in terms of where they focus their energy. So Australia is a very small market compared to Europe and America. So yeah, I suppose a bit of a bad taste in their mouth just because of that. But there was no capital outlay or anything. So anyway, me trying to make some good out of a very bad situation, said, look, there's no money coming, but obviously I haven't put all the eggs in one basket. I was having conversations with other people that were private investors. I can get that money in 2 weeks. And they said, sure you can. We got nothing to lose. We'll give you 2 weeks. I got an angel investor to sign on for $100,000 in 3 days. And it was a serendipitous moment. I met them on the street. I've shared this story before and it's a good one. There's a bit of luck in it, but it's not luck alone. There was one, I'd convinced the government to bring down 2 vehicles so that we could represent the state.
So you had some vehicles.
So there was, there was a small yes, which was, $20,000 to bring these vehicles down, represent the state at the biggest cycling conference in the world, Velocity, which we did, and we absolutely smashed. We took the mayor of Copenhagen, the transport planner that, now I've forgotten her name, but she's the person, the mastermind behind the city bike and all the bike trails in New York City. We had them, Stephen Yarwood, who was the Lord Mayor at the time. And we left a really good impression, something that sort of at least allowed these people to say, okay, well, they're trying to be a cycling city, because all we had was a Frome Street bikeway, which
at that time wasn't.
Well, anyway. It wasn't really a bikeway as a mayor of Copenhagen. So,
politely
pointed out in a laughing, mocking manner. So we did. We got that validation, and what that allowed was for me to have the vehicles down in Adelaide, and so I was riding these things everywhere. To every meeting, I would rock up to them.
So how long ago? So this was 3 years ago, or
so this was 4 years ago. Okay. So from that point, I was riding this bike around and meeting with investors and people that sort of had been in the startup scene and gone on to create successful businesses. And I was trying to work out what a startup was, how to start up a business, the stakeholders involved, what an investment meant, seed to series funding. And anyway, I ran into a person on the side of the road. I had my dog in the back of the EcoCaddy. His lead had fallen out. I had to park the trike, grab the lead. When I ran back, this person was at the EcoCaddy. That sparked up a conversation. I thought they were interesting. They were in business. I said, I want to learn more about business. They said, let's catch up. We did it over 3 months in parallel to me negotiating with the government. Government pulls out. This person turns around, had no idea of their financial background, said, how much do you need? I said, X amount. They said, I'd be happy to back you. That was it.
So people will look at that and say, that's luck. I'm not a believer in luck.
No, good.
I'm a very strong believer in preparation meets opportunity.
Absolutely. And proximity.
And for me, that absolutely lines up with my belief about what luck actually is. You're prepared by obviously having your minimal viable product on the street, number one. Yep. You'd already done that piece. 2, by actually reaching out to a business person and saying, hey, I want to learn more. Now, if you'd never done that, that would never have happened.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when the government pulled out, there was an opportunity.
Yeah,
brilliant, perfect.
Yep.
It's not like you're riding along on your fixie, burning down the street. Some dude said, "Hey, how about I give you $100,000 for the cash?" Right?
No. Right. I think a lot of people would be probably thinking that it's just like you ran into a guy with a suitcase of cash, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
No.
And you'd done the work and you'd put the effort in, you'd had the plan and all those sorts of things that actually allowed you to take advantage of that moment. And that's really what the luck piece is about.
And over the course of the 3 months that we caught up, once every week for a coffee, they were drilling me about questions. And I was using their knowledge and their wisdom to refine this pitch document, and constantly pitching, coming back, refining the pitch, pitching again, and answering all the requests from the government. So it was really robust in the end. And this person was learning from me as much as I was learning from them. And really what the big missing component of that story is the trust that was built up between me and this other party. Them sort of believing more so in me, and my belief in the concept that this thing was actually going to be successful. So.
This episode of The Self-Made Theory is brought to you by Caparezza Espresso. I've been frequenting Caparezza for a long time, and when I say frequent, I'm there at least every day, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. Why? Because their coffee is truly second to none in Adelaide. But what really stands out is their amazing service. Complete with traditional home-cooked pasta dishes, antipasta platters and daily specials, you will find an authentic Italian cafe experience right in the heart of the Adelaide CBD. They are also open Friday evenings for after-work drinks and pre-dinner nibbles. Just Google Caparezza Espresso for details, or you'll find them at 36B James Place in the Adelaide CBD. Most venture capitalists and others will say the idea is fantastic, and let's look at the idea, and we'll take that idea on its merit.
Yep.
But they look very, very hard at the founder, the entrepreneur, as part of that process, and can we see them driving this piece forward just as much as the idea? Because the idea on its own is not enough.
No, not at all. Yeah, you got to have some tenacity to get things off the ground. It's like
and resilience and passion, etc., that goes with it.
Yeah.
Wow. There you go. Yeah. And so EcoCaddy was born.
So EcoCaddy was alive and well on paper, and in the minds of all the people that I'd sort of planted the seed to. But now what it needed was some money to get it off the ground. With that was obviously a financial model which sort of looked at the costings over time. And so $100,000 was what we used to launch. And we started a taxi service, and that was on February 19th, 2015, right as the Fringe was starting. So the rest of our bikes were actually in quarantine and they weren't allowed to be released. So
I reckon that's when I met you. I met you on the side of Grenfell Street in Adelaide, and you were parked there, and I walked out and I thought, what is this? I'd never seen it before, and I actually remember you mentioning about the quarantine. I walked up and you were on the bike.
Yeah.
And we were just having a chat, and I went, man, this is a really cool idea. And I think at the time you said that the bikes were in quarantine, and I'm pretty sure it was around the Fringe time.
And I had no idea when they were going to be released, right? Yeah. So we had a launch party, but we didn't even have the bikes.
Yeah.
So we weren't launching anything. And they arrived on the day of the launch party. And I'm sweating bullets. And the worst thing about that story is that we launched on that day, but we didn't have time to look over the bikes. We were going to pull these bikes apart and put them back together, but we didn't even have the time to do that. And so we launched these bikes without properly going over them. And they fell apart on us, not dangerously, but just, things like the motor wasn't engaging, the brakes were squeaking, all this sort of stuff. And so we launched with 7 bikes and 2 of them made it back in one piece.
You're joking.
Yeah. So these things didn't work out of the box. And that's the start of a very painful story that lasted about 9 months. And is really
in terms of getting the bikes to the quality that was expected to be able to deliver a service.
Yeah, to the point where we were spending more time actually, being a service to the general public than servicing the vehicles. And there was no one qualified apart from myself to work on these vehicles because of the unique nature of the configuration of the components. So here I am trying to launch a business, run a business. But then I was spending 80 hours a week underneath these vehicles trying to fix them. And I was very I was moving very quickly towards my ceiling and burning out. And so,
Wow.
it's a painful story, but
And so what was going on in your mind in terms of, have I done the wrong thing? Did you have employees on board at that point?
am I allowed to swear on here?
You can. I'll probably edit it out.
Okay, well, I won't. But I was thinking I may have made a big mistake here.
Yeah.
Like I was still very passionate about it, and I was a big believer that it was going to be a success and that it needed to be a success, because it's a big problem out there that we're trying to solve, and it shouldn't just be EcoCaddy. Like, we are effed if there's not more companies like EcoCaddy trying to solve the transportation issue. We're in some big trouble. Like, the planet's in some big trouble. So I suppose it's that higher coaling thing.
So do you think it's that passion and that absolute belief that actually drove you through that
It's the
hard
only
time?
thing that's going to get you through. The only thing. You could have you could have Michelle Obama as your wife, and you're still effed if you don't have passion. So you need to have that. And, all the guys that have and girls that have been successful, it always comes down to that. And, I can't vouch for that enough. Because sure, there was days where I've thrown the tools down in complete frustration and exhaustion and been delirious. I'm surprised that none of my riders ever recorded me, but there would have been times where I was briefing them.
They probably have.
Where I was briefing,
buried on a phone somewhere.
And it was gibberish coming out of my mouth, But they got on with it because they could see, I think, and I've had numerous conversations with them since, and just like, man, we felt sorry for you, man. But we saw how passionate you were, and we didn't really understand what you were trying to say, but we went out there and we gave it a crack, and and that's I think the biggest thing that made us successful.
Isn't it great to have people stick by you because of your passion?
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's a very hard thing to. I've never asked those that, I'm pretty close to my team, and we laugh about it now, and that's where these stories sort of come out. And it's just like, man, and those that have left, reluctantly have said, like, I was drawn to what you were doing because I could see that passion.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's a thing that's going to get you through those long days, and keep you going, and also make sure that you're pointed. Your moral compass and everything else is pointed in the right direction, because there are a lot of different distractions out there. So
9 months later,
you've
now got, 7 vehicles on the road all working now?
No, we've got probably about 3 or 4 vehicles working decently.
Yep.
So we're going out there trying to compete with Uber, who's thinking about launching UberX. We have the Adelaide market out there that's still going, I can see the value, but it's still sort of this thing that I see in Bali. Is it dangerous? All these sorts of things. So we have these perceptional issues. But we're just putting the trikes out there and hoping that people will use the service. And they're out there 8 hours a day.
Yep.
Sometimes the trikes break down, so we have to swap it out for another trike.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So we could only promise, 3 to 4 vehicles.
So this is about 2 and a bit years ago.
Yeah.
So how is the business different today compared to it was 2.5 years ago?
It's radically different. One, I have a team back of house that's helping me with admin and operations, and that's smoothed out heaps of things. 2, the vehicles are sound. Like these things are indestructible. We've worked with an engineering company locally. I'm a designer myself, so it was a rapid iteration. We had to come up with a system. There's nothing off the shelf for us to catalog the issues that we were having, so that we could recognize patterns, so that we could understand where we had to make an investment, as in swapping out components, which is, it's an investment. It's an expensive bit of equipment. Do we start again? Do we redesign ourselves? There's nothing else out there that can do what we need to do. So there was all these conversations happening. So we're vastly different. We know more than any other pedicab company in the world about the pedicab. There are other manufacturers out there, but they don't have the close relationship in the operation of the vehicle as we do. And so we have this vehicle that is super robust, very reliable, and on top of that, we've got this consistent service of high quality individuals that are know the city, building a relationship with our customers, and we've switched from being a taxi service that's on demand to a transportation service that's pre-booked around events, and a tourism service. So we do sort of high quality experiences on our vehicle as a unique way to experience the city. And there are two primary focuses at the moment. Yeah.
So I was looking at, we were talking the other day about one of your experiences, which is Adelaide street art.
Yeah.
And I have a bit of a passion around that because I've been focusing. I've been photographing Adelaide street art for probably the last 2 or 3 years on my push bike.
Yeah.
So I'm a cyclist and I commute to work. And so I've been riding around, sticking my bike in front of a wall, hashtagging it BAAW, bike against a wall, and taking photos of all the street art in Adelaide. And of course, broadcasting that across my social media to all my friends who just go, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's so much street art here in Adelaide. And in fact, I had a number of people say, Ben, you should write a book. Ben, you should take tours and take people around the city. I'd love to do that. I'd pay you to do that. And here you are. You've done that.
There you go.
And I think what is even better way of doing it in one of your pedicabs.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, well, it was an aha moment where we're developing this product, which is our experience product. We work very closely with the South Australian Tourism Commission, and we conduct our own market research to sort of see where we can fill in the gaps. We're all about making the Adelaide pie bigger, so collaboration over competition. And there's some great businesses out there, particularly in tourism operation as well. So
are you reaching out to these people? Are you reaching out to the Tourism Commission?
Absolutely.
And others, or are people coming to you?
Both. And actually, it's an interesting point. So sales is a very painful thing for most people. You think about the used car salesman, and I don't think anyone really wants to be that. And so that was a conversation that I had to have with myself. And I was like, there was a time there when no money was coming in, right? In fact, we're burning through money, right? We got this startup capital, and I'm like, we got 2 months of runway. Otherwise, this business is dust. And I'm like, I know what I need to do. I need to go out there and I need to sell what we're doing out here. So I've always been vocal. I think I've always been good at pitching and selling the concept, which is something that came out of my training and I think sort of some of my natural abilities. But that's what I was doing as an urban designer, was selling urban design concepts to developers. And so it was sort of this there was this parallel sort of.
So did you sort of see selling as not something you wanted to do, or did you associate the selling piece with the used car salesperson?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
But not realizing that what you were doing in your previous business was actually selling anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So it was justifying what was sort of had this negative sort of image for me. It's just like, I don't want to be that guy. And look, we're an advertising service on wheels. If you wanted to look at EcoCaddy from a revenue standpoint, I suppose that's what we are. But it's us choosing what advertising we have on the back that defines what I'm selling, right? So it was having that conversation with myself. So it's like, okay, yes, we're doing advertising, but we're only going to have this type of advertising on board. Yeah. And so that sat well with me. And then the other part was like, well, I really believe in this business. And for this business to survive, you need to bring in sales. So, just get up and do it. And so it's like, okay, what is sales? How do I sell? Okay, well, I'm already doing that. So I got to tap into that part of me. So there was all these sorts of things that were happening. Yeah.
I've had a similar journey in my own career. So for years I was anti-sales, and I had a CEO who was, Ben, I want you out selling because I think you'd be really good. Oh, I don't want to sell. I'm not going to be good at that. And when you actually realize that what you're actually doing is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because what you're doing is you're bringing a great new experience to somebody that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah, you're giving value to another party.
And that's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we make it into being something that it's actually not.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dance, but it's so to get back to your question, are sales coming in or am I going out for sales? I actually had I made a decision and I said my strength is actually in marketing and branding. So I'm going to focus on that and I'm going to build the brand and I'm going to market the crap out of it. And through social media, we started to get the attention of organizations that were curious about our business.
And then was that your major platform, the social media?
It was, yeah. Word of mouth and social media.
Yeah.
great thing about Adelaide is that it's a small community.
Yep.
And I was using social media, actually very similar to you, in that I was riding around and I was taking photos of all the things that I noticed had changed in Adelaide. Okay. That was the first thing. I borrowed my mate's fixie and I'd park it in front of things like the Samri, the Ra, and I was taking photos. And so the first thing that I did with EcoCaddy was register EcoCaddy on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and that was, I understood the fundamentals, which is that you have to sort of build a funnel, right? And your social media is the first point of interaction for a lot of people. And then it was sort of building the social proof. Like, what is EcoCaddy? What is the brand? What is it interested in if it was a person? So it's interested in things that are happening around the city. It's interested in green technology, green policy. And so I was building sort of this personality up through a series of images and articles and all those sorts of things.
I love that description.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
If EcoCaddy was a person, who would it be?
Yeah.
And tying a personality into who EcoCaddy is.
Yeah.
It's a great way for any business really to evaluate itself.
Yeah, I think it's a good exercise. Yeah. And so from that, and it wasn't, it was this thing that didn't have a lot of structure to it, as in there was no real strategy at that point in time. I just did it. And that's one thing that I think people should do. You can always delete the images if you want, but, you obviously want to ensure that it's on point to, what your business is about. I strongly focus on the vision and the mission. And that was my North Arrow. That was making sure that I could always reference back to that, whatever I was sharing, and that was I was on point or on topic.
And has that changed over time?
The vision hasn't really changed. No. We're a service. We're a zero emission service, and we're using vehicles as such to solve the last mile and first mile gap. That's not going to change. What does change is the sequence of milestones that enables us to do that. And one thing that I'd be happy to share with the listeners is that, quite happily say that I sort of got that sequence wrong, in that we were trying to matter too early. The thing about...
So what do you mean by matter?
So trying to change the world, right? That's what we're all here to do, isn't it? Like we're trying to change the world, but to do that, you need a lot of things. You need influence. Some might call that power. You need reach. So you need to have an audience that can listen and thereby, you get that influence. You need resources like people to execute the vision, and you need resources like capital, and you need a certain amount of capital based on your strategy. So I had the people, which was built around myself, me being an urban designer. Mm-hmm. Our first riders were architects, a lot of them, uni students.
Yep.
I didn't have the back of house resources. We had a certain amount of capital, but it was being put towards the taxi service, it's a very hard model. Uber in particular, I don't think they've got it right, but they're burning through a lot of capital to get that model working. And we were sort of in a similar space. And it takes up a lot of time as well. There's a lot of administration. Just think about you times, potentially 100,000 people making a request for a vehicle to come to you, and think about what it takes to be able to handle that sort of a request at that scale.
So you said you tried to matter too early.
Yeah.
So what does that look like, and what would you have done differently?
If I was to sort of flesh out the sequence in the right order, and nothing's really linear, but this is in a linear sort of format, in that you want to make it first, then you want to master what you've made, and then you want to matter. So particularly with business, you matter when you're at scale. So you need to be scaled up to make an impact. If you're trying to make an impact without scale, you'll either burn out yourself or you'll burn through your resources. It was working that out.
So in terms of changing the world,
Yep.
surely you still have to have that fire in your belly,
Absolutely.
that corporate ethos,
Yep.
that vision and those values,
Yep.
even when you don't matter.
Yep.
So I assume that needs to be part of something that from the very inception that carries you through,
Yep.
even though you're not realising that yet because you haven't got to that scale.
Yeah, that is your core.
Yeah.
And what that does is it tells people what you're going to become, what impact you're going to make when you're at scale. And you need to inspire people. Like you, as a founder, or being as a part of a startup, you're a futurist. You're talking about things in the future that do not exist yet. And you need to get people to buy into that. So you need a very strong vision. And you need all these tools to convey that vision. So, your business model canvas, a business plan, a financial model, visualizations, MVPs, like products, tangible things that you can hold, props, all that sort of stuff. But to matter, you need to do it at scale. So you need to ensure that the steps are right. And so what we found out about 18 months ago was that we're not going to make it. We're going to burn out before we can actually make an impact. And so we're now focusing on things that would allow the business to be profitable while still being true to our vision. So that's why we're focusing on advertising and events-based mobility. It works really nice with events in that we can provide free or heavily subsidized transportation and move people when the city is experiencing peak demand. So again, we're a huge benefit when taxis are being overrun, when Uber is surcharging. We're out there providing free mobility. It's a pretty nice little model. So, and
probably at a time too where people are open to doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we all know Adelaideans that we like to get a little bit wild and risky during Fringe. So yeah, we are open-minded, and then we sort of go dormant a little bit throughout the year. So it works with us seasonally as well.
So corporate events, I read that you're sort of launching potentially into doing some corporate stuff too.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
So we've been testing, and again, it's how can we be of value to the city? Where can we be of value the most? And where we definitely see a huge gap is people that need to move around the city just to get to meetings. To get to events like that are happening at the convention center, from hotels. So there's a lot of this inner city movement, rail and light rail is the most efficient way to get people in and out in large numbers. But then there's all this sort of ad hoc movement that's happening around the city on a smaller level. And that's where you need a service like EcoCaddy. That's where EcoCaddy can really provide it.
And Adelaide's not really, we've got a tram.
Yeah.
That's okay.
A tram.
That's okay. We have a tram.
Yeah.
We're not a real cab city. Having lived in Melbourne, it's a cab.
Yeah.
Harler cab cities even more so, even if it's just to go for 5 blocks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that's the void? That's the space where you can play a role?
Yeah, well, there's this growing trend that people are becoming more time poor, and this is globally. Adelaide's a little bit behind in that regard, but I think we're becoming more conscious of that.
It did make me think on the way down here, why the hell didn't I ring you up? Because it's 36 degrees outside.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
And I'm lugging my podcast kit on my shoulder walking down here. And it's probably 6 or 7 blocks from my office. But as I'm about 2 blocks down, I'm going, oh my gosh, I should have rung. I should have booked.
Yeah, so you're like the perfect customer. But then it's then educating people. I don't think a lot of people actually realise that they could save themselves a great deal of pain and time. Time especially, if you look at it from a corporate level, time is money. So if we can save businesses time, i.e. get employees around the city faster, then it's costing them less money. And if we can do that in a way that's positively impacting the community and not adversely impacting the environment, then it's a win-win-win. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So what's next for EcoCaddy?
So we're branched out into Melbourne, and we're doing some great things down on Chapel Street.
Yep.
So we went there last year for an amazing provocative festival called Provocare. Sort of think dark mofo. So it's sort of that, like provocative arts. It's about getting people outside during winter, and then also making sure that people have a good time when they're outside. So moving them, it's sort of like a mini Fringe in that it's spread out throughout the city. Chapel Street's a really interesting case in that it's a long street, 2.4 kilometres long, about as long as the city is east to west, the CBD in Adelaide. And so they've got a bit of a problem. People will travel by car mainly to get to Chapel Street. Slowest street in Victoria.
It's terrible.
If you're in a car or in a tram, slowest tram in Victoria. It is, you can walk faster down the street. So perfect for Adelaide, perfect for EcoCaddy, and what we've been doing in Adelaide, particularly around our events that we're moving in these straight lines, so a shuttle service. So we're becoming a response to light rail, and what we can bring is the added benefit of frequency and some flexibility. So rather than a tram coming every 10 minutes, an EcoCaddy can come every 3, and we can actually drop you to your door. So we might be moving along Chapel Street, but then we can actually branch off of that main arterial and drop you to, if you're a resident, to a house or to a business that's off that street. So we're connecting the community, and the conversation has been really positive with the guys down at Chapel Street, the guys and girls. That conversation's moved a lot faster than what's been happening here in Adelaide. So we see it as a natural sort of growth area that we want to grow to. So yeah,
good.
Yeah.
So just perhaps in our last few minutes, we're actually in your co-working space. I think it's the correct description of it. It's rare that I go and interview someone where they've got their own recording studio. And so I had the last recording that I did with Joseph Menzel from Massive Joe's.
Right.
He's got his own recording studio. It's like, oh my
it's
gosh,
a thing.
right?
Yeah,
It's
you got to get on the train, mate.
Apparently, if you're in business these days, you've got to have your own recording studio. So we're in your recording studio inside of your space called
Mache.
Yeah. So tell me just quickly about Mache and how that came about and what it is.
Yeah, so Mache, like you've said, is a co-working space. We're situated on just off Whitmore Square at 178 Wright Street. We're an old house on just off the square, and what we've done is we've sort of reinvent the use of that space using the co-work or the co-working model, which is a response to the downsizing of a lot of companies and people like freelancers needing a space to work out of that's not a cafe or their own house, a place where they can be productive and have the added benefit of being around like-minded people. So what Mache essentially does is we sublet to members, so they get a membership, and within that membership they get their own space. They get all the perks that they would in a normal office, like super fast Wi-Fi, 24-hour access, security, things like tea and coffee and the facilities that you would get. But then you also get a productive space, and you're sharing the cost of those services over the membership base, which is great. So it's really cost effective.
It's effectively office as a service, isn't it?
Yeah, office as a service. Yeah. If you were to put it as something, it would be that. We're not a serviced office. That's a different model.
Correct.
So that's sort of, you sort of walk in, you get a space, and that's it. Thank you very much. With Mache, we're community orientated. So it's about leveraging the network and the skill set of the members that are inside the space, so that we can unlock other opportunities for the members, and you can just learn from them. You know, you got a guy across the way and you got a question about how do I do this in Photoshop, and he happens to be a graphic designer, rather than you having to go through all these forums and Google and all that sort of stuff. Maybe Google it first, yeah, you can save a lot of time and save a lot of cost. And likewise, you can win business. You know,
and
you
learn
can
from each other and
expand your team.
Brilliant.
You know, it's like, oh, we just got a contract from a client that's looking for a graphic designer. We don't have them on our team. James, come in here.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, work with us. Yeah.
Fantastic concept.
Yeah. And we happen to have a recording studio, which is really handy. We actually get a lot of interest, particularly from small businesses that are looking for, to podcast out of, because it's a great way to share insights about your business, about what you're doing, about what you're interested in, and all that sort of stuff.
Brilliant.
So yeah, it's good.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for sharing your time today, because I know it's tough to find an hour in your day when you're an entrepreneur. So thank you heaps for doing that. How can people find EcoCaddy?
Jump on to Google, just type in EcoCaddy and we'll be the first thing that comes up. Otherwise, EcoCaddy, ECOCADDY.com.au.
And I assume you're on all the social media platforms, etc.
All over it, Ben. Yeah. So yeah, if you type in EcoCaddy to Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, you'll find us there too.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. What an amazing journey Daniels has had. I really do love his tenacity, his excitement and his enthusiasm, and the impact that he wants to make or is making on the world. Don't forget to tell us what you think of the podcast, either by rating us or providing comments in your favourite podcast app, or via Instagram, Twitter or Facebook. Or you can send us an email at podcast@theselfmadetheory.com. Until next time, keep innovating, overcoming and prospering.